I was just telling Haley I came across this film because I'm covering Tribeca remotely from the Seattle area. So when I saw Pacific Northwest in the PR email, I said I have to hop on that. So
Wonderful.
I want to start with talking about Seattle. Tell me about your guys' own history and experience and associations with Seattle and Puget Sound in Western Washington.
Mhm.
You go first, Justin. You have more history with the area.
Yes. Well, Seattle's one of my creative homes. I grew up. My father was in the military, and so I moved around a lot. But Seattle was one of the homes that I kind of would always go back to creatively. I was a young actor. I started as a young actor, did a lot of actor training programs. Directed my first play at Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center in Seattle Central District, and then worked there a lot. So really, it's a home, creative home for me. I've gone away. I haven't lived there now for like 19 years, but I'm always attracted to stories and people that help kind of shine a light and elevate the richness of the community in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, that's awesome. Haley was just telling me about her own experience. Haley, talk to me about you and your history with Seattle.
Yeah, so I got to Washington. I moved to Washington in 2011. I lived in Richland, Washington for about a year, and I got on a movie set in Richland and met
Oh,
many people in the Seattle independent film community. And then ended up at University of Washington for college, and just stayed working with that community through college and post graduation. So that's just a really rich community, and I now live in Los Angeles. I left in 2018, but it's still a community that I feel so much a part of that it ends up pulling me back sometimes, and I'm happy to do that because I love working with Pacific Northwest craftspeople, and they're like so passionate about what they do, and the artistic community is so rich there. So that's my slice of the Pacific Northwest that I can cling to.
Mhm.
that's really cool, guys. Well, I'm super excited that we get to talk about this documentary you made, "Songs of Black Folks," which takes place here in the Seattle area. It's about an event that happens in Seattle. Let's talk about it. I don't know who wants to start, but if we can just get just an overview of what "Songs of Black Folks" is about.
Yeah, maybe I'll pick that up. But I think the genesis of the project actually started with me doing some pro bono work for Songs of Black Folk, and somebody assigned me to a podcast interview. This was like through a different agency. This was commercial work. I didn't know anything about it, and the podcast interview was with Leslie and Ramon. And I'm kind of learning about it beforehand, and then they come in, and I'm hearing about them speak about this amazing show that they're putting on. And it's two people, an uncle and a nephew, that are talking about putting on a huge orchestral performance with 80 people at one time at like the concert halls in Seattle. And I'm like, this is absolutely incredible. And it's like crazy to think that two people are just doing this independently. And I kind of felt like this is a documentary story. Needs to be captured right now. And their conviction about creating a holiday on the backdrop of Juneteenth, I just thought was so wild. It's like you're creating like a tradition, like it's like you're trying to manufacture like the Easter bunny or Santa Claus or something like that. So, I started following them, and then I was able to bring Justin on. Justin came on for the performance and really brought the expertise of like his theater background and his film background to be able to add to this documentary. But the documentary in Genesis is covering Leslie and Ramon's remarkable mission to create a tradition of Black music on the backdrop of Juneteenth.
Very
Mhm.
cool. I just
Yeah,
realized
and I think it's really.
mhm. Sorry, I
Go
just
ahead.
realized that my mic was picking up the wrong mic, so you might hear a difference in audio quality. But yeah, Justin, tell me about your involvement.
Yeah, I was happy to get involved. As I said, I kind of grew up doing theater and doing the arts in Seattle, and was kind of aware of just the long cultural tradition in Seattle of trying to celebrate the Black cultural legacy of Seattle through like Juneteenth, and I kind of grew up doing a lot of different shows that's again tried to bring attention and celebrate Black culture in the Pacific Northwest. And there's a really rich lineage that a lot of people in the rest of the country don't know about, the cultural contributions of the Pacific Northwest. And so I was really attracted when Haley invited me to this story, as well as particularly around like trying to define what Juneteenth is in this moment, and then how we celebrate Juneteenth, and the tradition that music has played in keeping this holiday alive. It seemed very serendipitous. Also, in the early 2000s, I was a part of a project called Sankofa Theater, which did a similar thing in terms of a theatrical commemoration of the Middle Passage that happened at the Moore Theater for like 4 years. That was sponsored by the Seattle Mayor's office. And so, doing this project, it also was very inspiring to just see that this tradition just it doesn't die, and to see how this generation and how this community now is kind of carrying a tradition that goes back than many of us further than many of us can remember.
Yeah, it's so interesting because Juneteenth is so the event Songs of Black Folks was kind of started to commemorate Juneteenth, and it's something that a lot of people are just recently learning about in recent years, me included. I had no idea about Juneteenth until it became a holiday, which is so important.
Hmm.
So I'm interested in knowing more about how you guys approached Songs of Black Folks as perhaps an educational opportunity about this, this important holiday.
Hmm. Well, do you mind if I take that,
Yeah,
Haley?
I'll go after. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like when Haley and I started working together again, she was immediately attracted to just the epic nature of the story that was happening, that was kind of unfolding, even though it was still kind of new to her, like in terms of like just the history and the significance of Juneteenth, and so we really wanted to try and like, so we had all this wonderful footage, and we had this rich interview, and then trying to figure out really like what is the journey that the film wants to take, and then really just recognizing how rich of a story is between Ramon and Pastor Braxton and Reverend Braxton, and that relationship, and then the relationship of Ramon and his grandmother, and the relationship of Ramon trying to make this artwork that celebrates a community that's bigger than himself, really just trying to find a way to effectively weave all of these stories so that they each like help tell each other's stories, right? So Ramon's story with his grandmother helps tell the story of Juneteenth, and vice versa, and so that's really what we were trying to do.
Haley, I'm gonna let you contribute to that, but this actually kind of leads to a question that I had because the runtime for the short right now is 26 minutes, which is kind of a longer runtime for a short. I'm wondering, in weaving all these stories, was there ever the temptation to make this a feature film?
Um, yeah, I think for me, well, I mean, maybe one thing to just go back on the previous question. I think also just it's an important note that Leslie and Ramon are very specific about how they use the language of Juneteenth, and they always say the performance is on the backdrop of Juneteenth. They don't say it's in celebration of Juneteenth, and there's they can talk about this better than I can, but they're just very specific about that language because I think they want there is a want for tradition, but there's also a want for addressing real change, and really we're focusing on political issues that affect Black people. So they, in Leslie's word, he's like, they gave us a holiday, so we'll use a holiday, but it's that continued focus to make sure that the language is used in a specific way so as not to distract from things that are meaningful change for Black people. Um, so that's just like I think an important note of how they choose to use language around Juneteenth, and it is a celebration, but there is like it is on the backdrop of this holiday. 26 minutes is a long time for a short. I it was I think I constantly I find that there's often questions about, do you make a feature? And I feel like for this one in particular, I wanted to make a short film and saw it as a short film because of the sense of urgency around it, and also because this is really hopefully a place for historical preservation for this group that leads to an everlasting tradition of this live show, which is epic and like 3 hours long if you go to it. So I think, for me, it's a nice like kind of piece of candy, or it's like the little appetizer before this like grand concert that hopefully many people will be able to see for many years.
Yeah, I love the timing of this because obviously the short is premiering at Tribeca. I believe it's June 7th, which is just a couple weeks ahead of this year's performance of Songs of Black Folks, which has tickets and is something I'm so tempted to go to now that I know about it. And so the awareness and the ability to share about this event right before it happens this year is pretty awesome. This this is a very interesting time for this movie to come out. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Ryan Coogler's newest film, Sinners, yet. But there's kind of a juxtaposition I was thinking about between Songs of Black Folks and Sinners, where you have Sinners that captures Black culture kind of outside of the church, and of course Songs of Black Folks that really captures the religious and spirituality of Black culture. But from either angle, what I'm observing is that it's a very interesting era to see Black culture represented in film in captivating ways that we haven't seen before. I kind of wanted to get your perspective on and your observations about the presence of authentic Black culture in media and entertainment right now.
Go ahead,
Justin. Well, I mean, I guess in terms of like, what do you mean, kind of like the state of state of the union kind of feel, like how we doing, or
maybe. I mean, I love that this movie is coming out now. Of course, we could always use authentic Black stories, but I guess I kind of want to get an idea of where this movie fits in your perspective of what is happening in with Black culture and entertainment.
Well, I think it's a difficult time just in terms of like, Black culture, Black art, Black expression tends to reflect the moment, the times that we're living in. That's kind of like one of the functions of Black art, Black expression, is to give an unfiltered lens into to the souls of Black folks. And so I think that then when you put it in like Hollywood, right, then you kind of have to go through a little bit of a filter just to get certain stories in Hollywood. We know that Hollywood has its own filters and stuff, but I think again the creativity. I'm always in awe of the creativity of Black artists to find their authentic selves in spaces you might not expect to find it. Like, I mean, everybody is so blown away. Like, how did Ryan Coogler pull this film off nowadays? And so the epic nature of just the filmmaking that he was able to pull off, I think, is testimony to the living spirit of Black creativity. And that when you juxtapose this film with that film, right, where it's kind of covering a little bit of a similar sentiment, or the function of Black music, secular and sacred, that there are still a lot of ways to explore it that we're just still, touching the scratching the surface, so to speak. When we start to really look beneath the surface of how this art and how this songs and how this music functions, I think there's just kind of an infinite bedrock of creativity to be, expressed and explored.
Justin, that's a beautiful answer. Thank you. Haley, was there anything that you wanted to contribute to that perspective or observations?
I think that's pretty well said. I think it's like, there's so much space yet to be highlighted, I think, with Black culture. And it's, Justin, I think, said it perfectly, where it's like and Ryan Coogler's Sinner is just like another vessel of that type of expression, which is a great movie. But yeah, I hope this is, one of many films, and continuing to highlight Black voices in many different ways.
Absolutely. So I have the privilege of talking with you guys ahead of another important holiday that's coming up, which is Mother's Day. And motherhood is a major part of this story when you think about Ramon's relationship with his grandmother. And gosh, there's so many things that I kind of want to touch on there, but I I think that I'd like to hear more about incorporating that component of this story, Ramon's grandmother, and um, the sensitivity behind including her part of the story in this documentary.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can start maybe with that one just too on like a genesis of how it came about as well. And this project was like as I mentioned, I did that podcast interview, and that was 2 months before that we filmed the show. And I had never met Ramon or Leslie up till that point. And so I didn't have a lot of insight into their day to day life and what that was like. And all these things kind of came about as the documentary was kind of unfolding in front of us. And then that the you know Ramon let me know that his grandmother, who taught him music, was in hospice care at the time that we were filming. And it became such a obvious part of his growth as a human being, as this amazing contribution of this gift of music that his grandmother gave him. Um, uh, and so there kind of brings together all the parts of like this film. Justin and I talked a lot about this film is by community for community, and that like really resonates through all parts of our process. And I think like parental figures and mothers and grandmothers are such a huge part of everyone's molding. And I think Ramon would say he was very lucky that he had the insight from his grandmother that he did, to be able to give him that the what he calls the untangible burning that gives him the passion for music.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that part is I think there's also like within the film there's an implicit exploration of black manhood, in the voices of Leslie and Ramon. Those are the voices that we hear, that narrate the whole story,
Mm-hmm.
but they are also, I mean, Ramon's mission at one level in the film is to honor his grandmother. So you see how this expression of black manhood, but that is guided by a maternal figure
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I think it's important to hear how black men are shaped by the legacies of black women, and just to hear them express it and freely sing about it, and all that. And that's also, I think, what kind of, at one point I was kind of like, wow, we don't have any sisters talking at this one. But then in realizing, oh, but this is Ramon and Leslie, and again, something, just let them tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, we don't have to qualify it, we don't have to validate it. And within there is a female presence just in their story, and just let them hear it through their voices, I think is kind of profound.
Yeah, speaking of profound, there is a line that kind of becomes the anchor of this story. Stay in the music. It's safe there. Like, what a line.
Yeah.
What a really great phrase to incorporate into this story. Was this something that you found really profound in the edit, or was this something that when you were recording and they said it, that's like, that's it, that's a real anchor for this story?
It was definitely like highlight this, change the color, put it in a special box somewhere, and in the editing process, like we know this was like I think when Ramon said it, it was absolutely fantastic, and there was a lot of play, with our editor David Faddis, who of like where do we put this to
Mhm.
make sure that, and there was just a lot of kind of like figuring out where it would just have the most impact, because it's the line speaks for itself. It's very, very powerful, and it becomes a major theme within the film. So yeah, I'm excited for people to see it. But yes, it was like, put this in a bin that is like AAA001 and like know that we're gonna use it somewhere. So
Yeah.
mhm.
Very cool. As I mentioned, the film is having its world premiere at Tribeca Festival in June. I just want to know what it means to you guys to have this film on a platform and on a stage like Tribeca. I mean, I've said before that I really love seeing Seattle in prominent places, especially when it comes to culture that I'm familiar with. And so it was so cool to come across this project and seeing it premiere at Tribeca. What does it mean to you guys to have this film there?
I think one is it's wonderful. It's, I mean, it's still kind of landing on me. You know what I'm saying? But I just feel so honored and thrilled to be able to help lift up Ramon and Leslie's work. And hopefully inspire other people to again to look for the kind of extraordinary work of Black artists that is happening around the country in places you don't expect to see it, because in working making the film, you also just see the Herculean effort that both these men have put into this task, and then the challenges of just trying to be seen. Black culture still struggles with the veil of invisibility, so hopefully just kind of giving light and a little more visibility to these two extraordinary men who also represent this two extraordinary community that represent an extraordinary legacy.
That's awesome. Haley, any final words?
No, I mean, I had the pleasure of being in Tribeca last year, so I was very surprised to get the call. And yeah, it's just an incredible festival, and I feel so lucky to be back with Justin. And yeah, this festival definitely hits a huge mission goal for this documentary too, of bringing awareness on just a broader level to be able to celebrate songs of Black folk.
That's great. Haley, Justin, I really appreciate you guys having this conversation with me. I love talking about this movie. I can't wait to continue sharing it with people, and hopefully we get it over here in Seattle at some point. Okay.
Yes. Absolutely.